Hi, I'm Mark. Welcome back to Three Bridges Model Railway and another quick update from the loft. I think from the last one I was working on this down in the garage, so I've got it back up in the loft. So this is my goods yard for London, and I've got my sort of mechanical point levers in so that I can basically just operate this as a small shunting yard. So I'm just in the process of sorting out the buildings and the final platforms downstairs. So hopefully maybe next time do an update on that. Sorted out the track round, so this is the lead in, built the subframe that will hold the goods line that sort of came from my Risborough line on the other side of the loft, so that's all sorted. I can get power to it. But this week the main activities are down the other end of the loft, going this way. So slowly in the progress of clearing out the junk that is toys, books and all that other stuff. They've moved across to the other loft to give myself a bit more space, and so I can sort of tidy up. And what I'm working on now is this section here. So from the end of Harrow on the Hill, I have two lines which are my Chiltern lines, so they need to go around these two beams, and then they basically will come across here and head down here to where my Marylebone station will be, which ends about there. So I need to build a subframe for that, which I'll do first, and then maybe later on in the video, if there's time and progress, I'll introduce you to the track plan that I'm going to have for the layout. Got a clear space to do the subframe and the deck. So I have basically in the loft, this area is going to fit. It's a bit of a jigsaw piece at this end. It will fit over the underground line that's underneath and the framework for that. So I've got various measurements for the various subframe struts that I need to build. I've got a measurement for the sort of the deck piece and the jigsaw, I suppose, bit that will sit on top. Because there's no easy way of just building a normal box section subframe, I plan for this one is to do it slightly differently. I'm going to cut the deck out first, so I'll know that that will fit, because I can go and just offer that up in the loft just to double check I've got that right, and then I can mark up where the corresponding struts underneath need to come through. So effectively the subframe for the Marylebone station is basically going to sit partly on top of the subframe for the underground underneath, and so the whole section's basically one sits on top of the other. That'll become more obvious as I get into the build. Anyway, so this one will be slightly differently. I'll try and update you as I'm going along. Also know I've got loads of points around here, haven't yet worked out where they're going to go, and obviously that will, some of that will be dictated by where the subframe is, because I can't change that. Right, let's see where we get to. Right, so I've marked up for the first section, so this is the main sort of Marylebone station bit, and then it sort of starts to get wider as you go round the roof struts, and this is where obviously the underground is coming through underneath. So I'm going to cut the first one out. The next section, which sort of bolts onto it, because this sheet isn't big enough, is about another ½ metre square. What I'm going to do is cut that dimension, because that's the only one I know I'm 100% certain of. The depth of it, I'm going to offer this up in the loft and then trim to fit, so that's a more sensible way to do it. Right, get out the track saw. Right, just a quick update. So this is the Harrow on the Hill end, I suppose, of the board. So this is where the Chiltern line and the underground lines are sort of coming through. So the underground lines coming through here. Obviously this is flipped over, and the Chiltern lines are running through here. I'm quite happy with all of this. I've just got to work out the length of this one that sort of braces it, and then this basically attaches to the existing framework up in the loft. So, and then I'll trim this back so that it's a neat edge, because obviously this is where I've got the underground line sort of declining down, and so that's part of the retaining wall. So that bit's all sort of sorted and will slot in place and sit on top of the existing sort of subframe. At this end, as you can see, it's a bit barer, and that's for a good reason. So this area is where I have all my points for, as you're sort of coming into the throat of the Marylebone station, so I'm trying to leave this as clear as possible. And actually there's not an awful lot to support anyway, because you've got the underground lines running through here, so you can't have anything fouling that. That's obviously the front fascia. And then the only basic parts I've got where I can support this part is this structure here. So this effectively sits on top of the underground line supporting structure, which sort of, if you can remember from an early one, curves up. That sits at the other side, so that'll hold it, and that this part sits on obviously the subframe whole support structure. Got a couple of pivot points. What I need to obviously have here is a viewing into the underground station, so I need to go and work out how much I cut out, and obviously I know this also needs to be deeper, so I'm going to work out at what point I sort of chop this, and then I need to put the deeper section in so I can see into my underground station. So I'll go and work that one out, and then I'll show you final result. Okay, so I think I've got it mainly done. So the baseboard's attached to the subframe, or the open framework. So that's the far end, and then obviously you've got this big section here that's empty. You've got the gap here so you can see into the underground line for Marylebone station. And then the only structure I haven't attached yet is this structure, which basically sits like that, and that effectively supports this end on various bits of this framework beneath. But I'm going to position it in the loft first with this, and then screw it in the right place. I'm just not 100% sure because the tolerances here are quite tight, so I think that'll be a safer way to do it. Okay, let's get it up to the loft. Well, I've done a test fit, so the ends are okay, they sort of locate in the right place, but it's this strut here, it's basically resting on the subframe of the underneath. I've got this in the wrong place, and I realised, so the measurement for this was 483, yeah, that one, minus 36, which is 2 widths, so that this moved across 2, so it's this one that's fouling, sorry, and I forgot to take the 36 off. This is 483. Anyway, it's easy to resolve, so, and the test fit was okay, and getting the board up into the loft was okay, it wasn't too bad, and I can see that if I had the track on the other side, taking it into the loft would be okay. I would be able to manage that, but I'll just need to make sure that nothing along the front fascia for the point rodding is in place until I get into the loft, but that's doable as well. Okay, I'll make the correction to this and then try and work out what to do next. Right, well, I've made the adjustment, marked up where the struts are underneath so that I can avoid them when I put my points in. Okay, so now's a good time to talk about what we're going to build. What's the layout of the Marylebone station? So this is the station I've redrawn probably the most times out of all my stations. So I'll pop up an image of so the 1946 drawing, I think, of Marylebone, and it's got various things in. So there's actually 5 main tracks or platforms in the station. My current design has 4, obviously, because I think 5 is just going to squeeze it. If I wanted to do 5, I needed this lower deck to be a bit wider, and I'm just really pushing it anyway. And I've got to reach behind to other stuff. and I'm really reaching. So I've decided not to go any deeper. So that was sort of the first one. So you sort of come through, as you come into Marylebone, you basically come under London first. There's a section where you're coming under Lord's Cricket Ground, so I'm going to have some buildings over the top, and then basically a tunnel comes out. I remember this, big high brick walls either side of you. One here curves off towards the massive goods line, and in an early one I said is, it's about 5 times the size of this passenger area. There's a turntable here. I played around with a couple of positions for it, and would I have a good shed. There was also a line in for a creamery over here that you can see on the 1946 design. Anyway, so that was version 1. Then I think I sort of simplified it down again. I still had the 5 lines, and also the possibility for trains to engines to come back. But I realised that with dim use, you don't need to worry about that. They just come in and out. So there just needs to be the option for one steam engine to do a run around. Again, a further few ideas and playouts and trying to work out sort of dimensions. So again, with the 5 or even 6 platforms here, you need about ½ metre. I don't have it, so you need the crossover. And this was a design that basically stuck for about 18 months really, and I just sort of parked it. I knew I had a rough idea of what I was going to do, so I've actually got 2 lines in. This one's just a short line that sits underneath the London section above. I've got a signal box, got the turntable, engine sheds, they aren't there, and then I've got the various lines in. I can have the bridge across, and I've got the creamery that's now moved to my goods yard, and I've got my 5 platforms, and then the entrance down to the underground underneath. So that pretty much stuck. And then a couple of months ago, when I realised this would need to be shorter, this sort of main board, I decided to simplify it down. I was just going to have 4 main tracks in, so there'll be a goods yard over this side. I know that as you came into Marylebone, you could look down, you couldn't get to this part, so there would be mail trucks and cars all parked down here, so I still want to have that sort of look. And then obviously I'll have the passenger at the other side, so depending on which side you get out of the train, you could do that. And then there'll be the 2 lines in the middle, and then another platform, and then the final track here. There is at Marylebone another platform this side, but I just don't have the space. May have a hint of it, but let's see how it goes. And then obviously I need to have the 2 lines in, so simplified it down and don't have all the other stuff. Still got space to have a signal box. I've got to have a bridge across, so I'll show you the image of that on the screen. And on the bridge at the end of the platforms, so the bridge sits about here, you get the old signal gantry, so again I'll put those up. And Marylebone had the signal gantries, the old post style, they were still in existence to the end of the 80s, so partly because Marylebone wasn't going to be upgraded, it's sort of the poor relative of the London stations. I'll talk a lot more about that in some of the future episodes when I'm building it, but so it didn't get upgraded. Obviously I've got to have the main canopy across, so I'll show an image of that on the screen. I'm really looking forward to building the main canopy structure. So although the track layout isn't exactly as it is at Marylebone, it's got a lot of the key features, and I just want Marylebone to have that look of Marylebone station. I'm not too worried about the track, and so I'm putting in an extra line here, and this is going to allow me to basically park up my I suppose heritage carriages, and it allows my steam train to do a bit of a run around, turn around on the turntable, and then head back out. So, and my plan always for Marylebone was to make, certainly with all the points, so there's 8 points, my levers and bell cranks to manually operate those. I'm going to have a manually operated turntable that has a wooden cog system that I've got to build. Bit of fun for me, and I'm also wondering about if I actually make the signals just static, or do I actually make those mechanically operatable, as you can do. So that's the plan. Pretty much, I know it's a very quick run through. Okay, so I've laid out the final track. What I'm mainly wanting to do with this exercise is just work out where the point locations are going to go, so that I can start marking up and drilling holes and sorting out the point rodding underneath for those point positions. So, as I sort of went on earlier, I'm going to have 4 tracks in, not the 5. I still want to have quite a bit of a depth here because I want to have vehicles and the mail goods sort of depot, the grubby end of the station that I used to see. This bit here, so I've got plenty of space in the loft to build the concourse in the next section. I don't need to worry about it. And the main station building, that's all stuff I'm going to try and do next year. For this year, I really want to just get the platform seat, the canopy. The canopy is the big thing for me. That tells me it's Marylebone. The retaining wall at the back, so there's a big wall that runs along the back of the station, and then there is a street of houses. I'll show those in another later clip. Again, I want to build those, so there's quite a lot of scratch building on Marylebone. I'm really looking forward to, and it will take a while like anything, but I'd set myself a target of 3 months to get most of the Marylebone structure done. So it was going to be June, July and August. In terms of my time scales, at the end of June now, so I think it's about 26, I was a bit behind on this because other things had sort of, it took a lot longer to get the underground line electrified, do the wiring and stuff, so I'll bear that in mind for future because that was a learning lesson. And then I went off and decided to build a good shunting yard, which wasn't on the plan. So this week has been playing a lot of catch up. I'm quite happy where I've got to. I've still got a few more days where I can work on this quite intensely to sort out a lot of the rodding. Next week, I know I'm going to be spending most of that week decorating one of the rooms in the house, so I'll have less time for the layout. But we'll make progress. Anyway, so that's that, and I've given myself quite a generous length. There is a generous length at Marylebone. The platforms are much longer than the DMUs. They sort of stop at the end of the canopy. Many people who used Marylebone, certainly in the 80s and 90s, will remember whole platforms of like 100 feet of porter cabins when they were doing a lot of their work at the station. So this is where I suppose a bit that maybe deviates a bit from it. So this is where I'm going to be able to hold my heritage carriages, simply so that steam train can pick them up, and also do a bit of a run round using the turntable. So got the main points here. There's nothing under the board, so I'm quite happy with that and the location of those. And then I've got another section of points here. Again, there's nothing under the board, so I've got plenty of space to do stuff, and I've still got plenty of space to have other stuff in between, all the stuff that comes with large stations. And then I've got space for the bridge over, so quite happy about that, even though it will probably come over somewhere the points are, but that's fine because all the signalling for the points needs to be at the end of the platforms anyway. And then the last section, so this one, I've tried to keep this one as clear as possible, as big and much space as possible. So this is where I need to have a turntable. Not that. And I've probably got the space to do an extra little track so I can park at least one steam train. If you followed it this far, thank you. Well done. I picked up a few more subscribers over the month, which was nice, I think, after the last one, and getting a few more likes, which is always nice, so thank you for that. I'm quite happy with where I've sort of got to halfway through the year, so I feel I'm on track with where I want to be by the end of the year, which is pretty much to finish a lot of the lower level of the layout and that sort of Marylebone trip up from Wendover and Aylesbury. Anyway, as always, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and maybe catch you next time, and happy modelling.